thought experiment, um, which is an influential paper which it influenced many people's attempts to build things into GAs, and people try to build systems that specifically take into account the Baldwin effect, or try to simulate the Baldwin effect. What do I mean? So one conjecture how evolution worked, people believe could be possible, was this idea from Lamarckianism as opposed to Darwinian evolution, was that things that you did in your lifetime could change your genetic makeup. So a typical example would be, you imagine giraffes on the savannah seeing trees, and they strive for that leaf, and they stretch their neck a little bit, and because they stretch their neck a little bit, offspring would be able to have a better stretched neck. So it somehow would change your makeup, and that makeup from what you did in the organism's lifetime could then be inherited by the child. But the Darwinian model doesn't allow this possibility in any direct way. What happens is you know, things that can stretch their neck perhaps survive, and that it wasn't the result of some change in the organism's lifetime. Okay. But then the idea of the Baldwin effect was that having certain plastic traits or learning in the lifetime of the organism could somehow make an organism more fit and allow this to learn regular traits more easily in the population. Let's see what I mean precisely. So, Baldwin effect, proposed in 1896, even though it wouldn't have been DNA, but it would have been. So the idea is assume that individual learning, i.e., for instance, like stretching a neck, doesn't have any direct influence on the individual's genetic makeup. But the ability to learn then reduces the need to have this as a hardwired trait. I.e., I don't necessarily need a trait for avoiding cars if I can learn to avoid cars. So then the idea is that if you have individuals which are plastic in some way or able to learn, like to avoid cars, that this supports a more diverse gene pool, because learning allows your gene pool to have a variety of individuals with various hardwired traits. You can have more hardwired traits if there's some mix of learning or plasticity involved. So more diverse gene pool will then support faster evolution of the gene pool, and thus individual learning indirectly increases rate of evolution. And so I use this example learning, but you can imagine any sort of plasticity of the organism, ability to adapt to the environment in its lifetime without being hardwired. Okay, how's this supposed to work? Some sort of new predator appears in the environment. Individuals who can learn to avoid it will be selected. So you don't have some special trait to know to avoid those cars that are going to run you down when you try to cross the highway. The increase so individuals who can learn will be selected. Increase in learning individuals will have more diverse gene pool, which results in faster evolution. And so it's perhaps even better to have hardwired in, to avoid cars in the highway, and thus resulting in new traits such as fear of cars. So in general, how much this indirect learning influences inheritance in real biology, I'm not in any way expert enough to comment on, but in general it's kind of debatable, and the examples which have been given, which people believe are kind of instances of the Baldwin effect, are bird song and calluses. So for instance, in some individual, the skin may be soft in some area, but then if you need to use that for something, it can become hard and it can protect the individual, and then you can evolve tougher skin there. So people believe that this has been proposed as an example of the Baldwin effect. Okay, I don't know too much about it in regular biology, but in terms of a thought experiment, Hinton and Nolan proposed, just like we had the Axelrod was curious about how the evolution of cooperation might be possible, and he kind of did a thought experiment and actual experiments with things learning to play the prisoner's dilemma game. Hinton and Nolan kind of designed a thought experiment to show how the Baldwin effect could happen in a GA. This is not meant to be practical, what they're doing all. This is a thought experiment, which includes a bit of computer simulation. Okay. So the idea is have a GA where the idea is that somehow you can imagine that you're evolving some extremely simple neural network. And so you can imagine you're trying to evolve a neural network with your GA. A neural network consists of a set of weights. But you can imagine that not only do you have fixed weights, which corresponds to your neural network, but you can make other weights in your neural network not fixed, and thus somehow trainable in their lifetime. Okay? So the genetic makeup determines which are going to be fixed weights and which are going to be the quote trainable weights in this thought experiment. But you can imagine doing this yourself and using a GA to evolve a neural, to evolve the weights for a back propagation neural network, which people do. So in this experiment, which none of this will be surprising when you see the experiment because it was designed for this to happen, it's a thought experiment, when there's no individual learning, population failed to improve over time. When individual learning was allowed, what happened was early generations contained many individuals with many weights which are trainable, whereas the later generations obtained higher fitness, the number of trainable weights decreased because it's better to exactly have the thing rather than to learn it in their lifetime. Okay. Imagine that individuals controlled by some neural network, and there's some very specific behavior that they need to learn, which is going to correspond to the configuration of some 20-unit neural network. If it's some exact configuration that's needed, it's going to be very hard to learn this, because if you don't have the configuration at all, and you know you're going to die from being run over in the road, you'll have zero fitness. However, if you do have the configuration, you'll have 1 fitness. Okay? So obviously, the way this problem is set up, this is something, you know, basically impossible to evolve with a GA unless you let it run for a long time, because, you know, your fitness landscape is horrible. You're searching for a needle in a haystack. Okay? What can you do? Well, now, you know, we're imagining that this is a neural network in an individual. So now we're going to have a similar representation. So once more, we're going to try to learn this neural network of 20 connections, but now we're going to kind of simulate the organism's lifetime, and we're going to allow learning in the lifetime. So the given representation will be a given thing is on 1, or it's absent, or it's undecided. This will be our learnable trait. Okay. So we're not going to just evolve some given specific sequence of 1s or 0s. I mean, that's what our aim is, but we're going to have some sort of plastic trait in there. Okay. Population now consists of 1,000 individuals. This is their thought simulation. Each individual, when they initially set it up, they set it up so any given loci had 25% probability of 0, 25% probability of 1, 50% probability of a question mark. Then there's going to be some model of learning for the individual in its lifetime. The model of learning is the following. 1,000 trials are given to learning. What happens? Learning is randomly setting each question mark allele. Okay. So if you manage, so a given trial, you have maybe 7 alleles which aren't fixed. You select uniformly at random some value for each of those question mark alleles. If it turns out your fixed ones and your question mark ones are all correct, then the individual is considered to have learned. And then they give a fitness to this learned individual, where the fitness is as follows. The fitness runs from 1 to 20. The individual never learns, never learns that a car is going to run it over when it crosses the road, but they'll die at a fairly early age, and its fitness will maybe be 1. Okay. But if it learns it on the 0th trial, then there's 1,000 remaining trials, and so the fitness becomes 20. Okay. So depending on when, if ever you learn it, you get a chance to be fit. Note that if in your non-question mark positions you have things set wrongly, there's no way you're going to ever learn. Okay? So you have to have your fixed positions correct already. Then you have to get lucky on your question mark positions. Okay? Questions about the setup? So in any given individual, we have the following observation. fitness ranges between 1 and 20. That's as I just discussed. The more question marks an individual has, the harder it is going to be to guess. But on the other hand, if you have a bunch of 0, 1 alleles, you may very well be in the case where one of those 0 and 1 alleles is not right, period, and so there's no hope of learning it. But now we have an interesting observation. Now, you know, we're imagining that this line somehow represents this space of the 3 to the 20 possible genotypes. You know, you have 1, 0, or question mark in any of the 20 positions. Whereas before, you know, there's only one precise thing which gave you your 100% fitness. Now, there's a range of things. You know, you have 19 positions correct in various, in 20 possible ways with a question mark. You have 18 positions correct in 22 2 ways, and so forth. You now get a bit more. There's still lots of things that are completely incorrect and have only a fitness of 1 in this model, but other things now have a range of fitness. Okay, so now our fitness landscape is smooth, and there's some hope of the GA evolving the correct answer. In their setup, they used fitness proportional selection, single point crossover. I don't know the details of what the crossover probability was. Okay. Okay. Questions about the setup so far? Okay, so here's a graph of the performance of the GA. So essentially, these 3 different lines are just different population sizes: 250, 1,000, 4,000. And what this graph demonstrates isn't anything surprising so far. It's just that the fitness increases over time. And given that the fitness landscape isn't a needle in a haystack, somehow it's not surprising that the fitness of your population increases smoothly over time. That's all it demonstrates. But just to point out, so far, not demonstrating anything about the Baldwin effect. Okay? The Baldwin effect isn't, you know, sometimes the Baldwin effect is considered, learning or plasticity makes things more fit. That's not the Baldwin effect. The Baldwin effect is learning or plasticity enables the evolution of hardwired traits more effectively. Perhaps a more interesting plot is the following plot. So on the axis is percent or ratio of the number of alleles of different times. So open circles is the number of incorrect alleles. The solid line is the number of question mark alleles, and the solid circles is the number of correct alleles. Rather than discuss this, it's perhaps easier to discuss the zoomed in graph. So here I've zoomed in on the first 50 generations, where the previous it was out to 800 generations. So in the first generation, there should have been, you can't tell from this plot what was happening in the first generation, but there should have been 50% of undecided alleles and 25% yeah, it should have been 50-50 in the first generation. Okay. Okay, so let's look at what's happening here. So the dashed line is the number of incorrect alleles. So as a population is getting more fit, we know that this must decrease. Okay, that would be a, well, we don't know that must. Yeah, we know that must decrease. What's interesting is the difference between the dotted line, this line, and the solid line, the undecided alleles. So, actually, so what we see is that the number of undecided alleles initially is increasing over time, and there's actually a big jump right at the beginning. And the number of correct alleles is increasing, but the point is that these plastic alleles decrease. So it first goes up, and then it goes down, and this is the idea that, and this is the Baldwin effect, that having this plasticity allows you to get the hardwired traits. If this just stayed constant or it increased, we wouldn't have demonstrated the Baldwin effect. Actually, looking at the zoom plot, the effect is relatively modest. I think it would have been a neater thought experiment if this line really went down much further. Would have been more persuasive. But nevertheless, this is still, the paper is very influential. People try to incorporate this in their GA or GP. I imagine that if you thought about it, you could do it, for instance, with your multiplexer problem. If you wanted to try, you could have an allele which was a question mark at a given position and sample over your terminals there and have learning and slow down your already slow code. But it is something you could definitely try for yourself. Okay. Questions? Okay. What order should I do things? I think I have plenty of time. I'm going to do you have slides on the share algorithm? No. How did I do these slides? Okay, quick question again. How many of you are not taking supervised learning? 3. So everybody who's taken supervised learning will be familiar with this a little bit, at least one aspect of this. Pass it across.
So, we're supposed to have the slides you just showed about the
You should have that from,
the web page.
yeah, it's also week 3.
Week 3.
Week 3. Whoever is taking supervised learning, I'm not going to examine you on this topic, but this topic's kind of interesting to me because, as I said, there's not too much, quote, theory about genetic algorithms, but I want to show roughly if you're willing to simplify your genetic algorithm, that it's actually possible to understand it or prove things about it in a simplified context. So, I'm going to tell you a little bit about an algorithm that's used in online learning and in machine learning, which is a fair amount of research and continuing research on, which has a variety of applications. And there's, at the end, I'll show you how to interpret it as a genetic algorithm in a limited population. Okay, so for those of you who were in supervised learning, you already learned a little bit about online learning, and we proved some guarantees about online learning. And one thing which we talked about was these simple expert algorithms, which we can use to prove some sort of guarantee on combining algorithms, which change. What I want to do is I want to go a little bit further than I did in supervised learning and consider the case where these experts are changing over time. Okay, so I'm going to give an algorithm which does online learning. It's going to track concepts of change over time. You can imagine it's designed to combine other algorithms. You can prove things about this. It's an efficient algorithm, and there's practical applications. What is online learning? Online learning is this following model of learning. You get data in a stream. Each trial, you make some prediction. You then receive some measure of the performance of that prediction, and then you go on and you make a new prediction. Okay? So you can imagine this is just like you want to invest in the stock market, and you maintain some portfolio of stocks. Each day you get some, your stocks either go up or down, and you have a chance to adjust the portfolio, and your goal is to maximize your money or minimize your loss. Okay. So here's the model, perhaps more specifically. Here we imagine we're receiving a number of predictions from algorithms, perhaps have expert 1, expert 2, expert 3, expert 4. Each of these algorithms predicts different values. They're trying to predict some true value. So here expert 4 predicts 0.75, there expert 3 predicts negative 1.5, and so forth. The algorithm looks at the predictions of your experts and tries to combine those predictions in some fashion. Okay. We then receive a label, and then we receive some loss on that label. So in the scenario, the algorithm keeps getting these predictions. It combines the predictions in some way to produce a prediction, and it receives some loss on each time. So we can talk about the loss of our algorithm, which for us we'll see correspond to a genetic algorithm at the very end. Here our loss in this example is the square loss. And one aim you might want to do is, you have these different predictions. It might be hard to do well in an absolute sense on a problem, but you might hope to do as well as perhaps the best expert in that sequence of predictions. So here what we're going to hope to do well is maybe, without more information, we just get predictions from different experts. One type of goal would be to do not much worse than the best of these. Okay, so formal model, each trial we receive some vector predictions. To keep things simple, we'll leave them in 0, 1. The algorithm outputs a prediction in 0, 1. It then receives the outcome 0, 1 and 0, 1. And the performance of the algorithm is measured by its loss. So for instance, the square loss. How should we predict? Well, you can imagine a natural way to predict is you have some trust or confidence in each of these experts. You have some belief in how fit they are. Okay? And the more you trust an expert, the more you should weight its prediction. So if xt is that vector of predictions of some given expert, the more you trust an expert, the more weight you have for that individual expert. So in this dot product, its value will be larger than the other. Okay? So that would be, that's the soft motivation for the algorithm. To see how this might be realized, here's a specific update. What we do on this update is each expert has some given weight. When we make a prediction, that expert's prediction is xti. Okay? We then receive a true outcome yt. if this difference is large, we'll have e to the eta times some large positive number, e to the eta times some large positive number. It's a very small number, and so this weight will become small. Okay, so it'll get decreased a lot. Suppose the expert is correct. If the expert is correct, well then yt will match its expert prediction exactly. This will be 0. E to the eta times 0 is 1. So the weight is unchanged in this term here. So imagine we first do that for all the experts. We look at how they do, and we kind of punish our belief in the experts by decreasing our weighted belief in them. Okay. What we'll go ahead then is we'll sum up all the weights of our experts and divide out by the sum of all the weights. So this is a number between 0 and 1, and looks like a probability vector. Okay. So questions on how this update works? Yes.
What exactly is
Go ahead.
What exactly is
Eta?
the thing you're trying to find?
Yeah, right here. So eta is the learning rate. Okay, so let's talk about eta. Eta is some positive number between 0 and infinity. Now what happens if we make eta infinity? If we make eta infinity, then if the expert receives any loss at all, it'll go straight to 0. Okay? So you know, if it makes any loss, it completely destroys an expert. If we make eta 0, then this term is ignored and these weights never change. So what we imagine then is that in a, roughly speaking, we expect in a noisy environment, we want eta to be large, because any individual trial, the expert might be wrong, and we shouldn't punish them so badly for making a mistake if in general people are going to be making lots of mistakes or having lots of loss. However, if we expect one of the experts to be strongly correct all the time, then we'd want to let this eta go to infinity, because then we know somebody's probably right, and so we can get rid of other information. So eta is the learning rate parameter, which the more noisy the environment, the smaller eta should be. Okay. Okay, so something which has been done, and I proved it in one case in supervised learning, is a lot of research has shown that using that previous type of update, we can prove bounds of the following form. Your guarantee that your algorithm will make is that the loss of your algorithm will be no more than the loss of any expert plus log n. Okay? So we're bounding the loss of the expert, the algorithm, in terms of a single predictor. Okay? Just kind of a nice result, because suppose you had some million experts. If you had some million experts, you know, if one of those does well and the other one doesn't, other ones don't do so well, well, what does it say about the master algorithm? It says the master algorithm will do as well as that best expert plus some constant, which, you know, in the setup I have here is 2, times the log of n. If n is 1,000,000, natural log of 1,000,000 is something under 20. So you only pay logarithmically in the number of experts, and so it's potentially a very nice way to combine things. So you might ask yourself where this bound comes from. Should I prove it? I don't want to prove it because that will take too long, but the proofs aren't so bad, but I will motivate the proof from a simpler case. The simpler case for those of you who weren't in supervised learning, is the following. Let's consider an even simpler scenario. Suppose experts predict, each expert predicts an xt that's either 0 or 1, and the outcome is likewise a yt, which is in 0 or 1. So it's one of two values. So you either get it right or you get it wrong. Okay? Now, in this model where there's two outcomes, if we make the assumption that there's a single correct expert, let's see if we can prove a bound. We have a single correct expert in this model, i.e. we have a setup where the noise is low, so we can let eta go to infinity. So what that means is, for the experts whose weight, whenever an expert makes a mistake, we simply wipe out this expert. For the experts that don't make a mistake, their weight is unchanged. It's average between the remaining things. So what does this algorithm amount to in this case? It amounts to predicting with the majority of consistent experts. Okay? How many mistakes can you make if you predict with the majority of consistent experts? Well, if you don't make a mistake, nothing necessarily changes. But if you make a mistake and you're predicting with the majority of consistent experts, you must wipe out at least 50% of your experts. So there's pictorially, I'm wiping out 50% of my experts. I make another mistake, I wipe out at least 50% of the experts. How many times can I wipe out 50% of the experts? Well, for a finite set of experts, that's just log 2n. So in the assumption of a consistent expert, we can see how this bound might come about. And then it's a bit of algebra to generalize it to the case where you have noisy data sequences. Questions so far? Okay. This I already did in supervised learning. Now we want to go farther, and we went to supervised learning. If you're really interested in adaptive algorithms, maybe you don't want to do as well as the best single expert over time. Maybe an adaptive algorithm should change over time. If perhaps first one expert is good, one thing is well adapted to the environment, that can change. You want your algorithm to somehow change with adaptation. So where I'm going is, instead of trying to do as well as the best single expert, if I look at these 4 trials, I can measure that this expert actually has the minimum loss. Another goal might be to do as well as the best sequence of experts. Okay? So if we look at the best sequence of experts, where we allow one change in expert here, you can look and see that, for instance, if I predict with expert 2 for trials 1 and 2, and I predict with experts expert 1 for trial 3 and 4, that does better than expert 4 does alone. I.e., so the best sequence of experts may improve on the loss of any best individual expert because it contains that as a special case. So we're really trying to be adaptive now. Okay. So rather than doing as well as the best sequence, rather than doing as well as the best expert, our aim now is to have an algorithm which will do as well as the best sequence of experts. So for instance, some expert is best in this segment, some expert is best in that segment, some expert is best here. But we want to, so the loss of a sequence of experts is going to be the sum of the losses over that segmentation of the sequence. But the algorithms won't have as prior knowledge when these segments are beginning or ending. Don't need this. So we discussed the single expert case. We want to do not much worse than the best single expert. Now we're going to have a more challenging goal. You give me a sequence of experts, and I want to do not much less, not much worse than the loss of that sequence. So on each trial, we allow our comparison expert to change. Okay? How well can we do in this scenario? Knowing what we know so far, we can already do pretty well in this scenario, at least in one sense. We have an algorithm that attains this bound, that the loss of our algorithm is less than the loss of the best expert or any expert plus, I'll put C log n. Okay? So if we have an algorithm that does that well, let's think about how we can do well if we want to perform well in a scenario where we potentially have a sequence of changing experts. Okay. What's the problem you imagine for an algorithm if the sequence of changing experts changes rapidly? Can you imagine if you're hoping to do as well as the best sequence of experts, if you somehow, for instance, let that comparison object change every trial, you're probably trying to solve a hopeless problem. I mean, how could you possibly track something that changes every possible trial? You know, you'd have no knowledge. So somehow what we're going to aim for in our performance is to do as well as if maybe first we're good with one expert for 10 trials and another expert for 20 trials and a third expert for 3 trials. The number of times that we change experts, we'll say, is the number of times that the algorithm switches or shifts. So if we're switching all the time, k will be large because that will correspond to the number of times that we switch. Okay. So if we have a bound like this, how can we, and I tell you in advance that the expert, you know, for instance, we want to do as well as an expert which switches 3 times, how can we prove a bound like this? We know how to do this. Now we do as well as the best single expert. Now suppose I tell you that the best expert changes 3 times in the sequence. How can we design an algorithm that will do well in that case? Okay, so what you can imagine is so. Imagine we have 5 experts. The purple expert, the red expert, black expert, blue expert, and the orange expert. We have an algorithm which obtains this bound. We want to use it to design an algorithm which obtains this bound. And we're not going to be worried about efficiency for the moment. Well, so what are these algorithms? These are the algorithms which are combining with our master algorithm. We receive a sequence of predictions. Over time, we receive the purple predictions, the red predictions, the black predictions, the blue predictions, and the orange predictions. Suppose we know that we're going to try to do as well as the best sequence of 3 experts. What we can do is then kind of design meta-experts, okay? Where these meta-experts look like these experts, but just consist of segmentations of them. For instance, we have an expert that predicts, we take the experts of blue for the first 5 trials, then we take the experts of orange for the next 7, and then we perhaps return to the experts of blue for the next 3 trials. And we can imagine creating all these color possible combinations. Okay? So we take these experts and we design this large set of experts. How many experts are there if there's 3 shifts? Well, we need, if we have 3 areas, we can color the first one with n possible colors. Then we're going to change to a different color. That gives us n minus 1 possible things to choose from. And then we get another n minus 1. Then we also have to account for the positions where they change. Okay? If they have 2 shifts and our sequence is of length L, there's 2 points that we can choose for shifting, so that's L, choose 2. Okay? Hopefully I did this right. But we can generalize this. Let's get rid of the 2 changes. We can make it k changes, or k plus 1 changes. I'm not good. We color roughly, let's pretend we color with n things, k times, and we need to choose k boundary points. That gives us n to the k, L choose k, meta-experts. Okay? This is our new n meta, where we have all these different meta-experts. Then we go ahead and we take the log, and we get k log n plus log of L choose k. Log of L choose k is roughly k log L over k. Okay? So this is what we can do. Drawbacks of this proposed technique is that, well, the more shifts we have, the more meta-experts I would have to create, and this algorithm is exponential in k in terms of running time. We have to create all those meta-experts. And also somehow the guarantee, in the single expert case, the guarantee didn't depend on the sequence length. Here it depends on the sequence length, which is a bad thing. So we'd like to remedy this problem. Questions so far? Yes?
Is it not k minus 1?
Probably. I wasn't worrying about plus ones and minus ones here so carefully. Yes. All L, K, N, and K, I'm all kind of up to plus one or minus one here. Okay. Good point. Let's go ahead and take our break.